Thank you. I'll try to tell a few stories. So my background is completely different, I would say, but there's a lot of overlap, I think, also as well in the last story. But it's all starts from a design point of view. I'm an industrial designer with Sophisti. We're a team of 6 designers and engineers. Actually, all of them are both designers and engineers. Yeah, we wanted to take this opportunity not to show like the latest 3 years of most polished work, but actually to reflect a little bit on all the projects that didn't make it, or the projects that we learned a lot from, or things that we did back then that we rather would have changed. Yeah, it's a bit of a more messy presentation than I'm normally used to give, so bear with me. And of course, yeah, it's connecting things, but of course, I'm preaching to the choir here. It's about it's about connecting people and how can things, be a vehicle of that, and how can things contribute, and how should they not contribute. So very short slide. So we are based in Amsterdam, like I said. Small team, that's also by choice. I don't see us growing beyond 6. That's not us. That's not me and my business partner to lead a team bigger than that. We like it that way. There's not a lot of projects we weren't able to handle with a team of 6. We work for clients all over the world. We do a lot of projects in the Far East, in China, and we work for a lot of American clients, which is challenging, and European clients. Here are a few. So there's a few brands that are very well known, but we are as proud actually of brands that are less known because they're startups, and some of them are not even startups anymore. Like Ikawa is 5 years old, and there are 50 people, but yeah, you get to experience that whole trajectory. We help from idea to connected product. Well, this is a bit of a simplified overview. In reality, of course, it's a lot messier, but we combine electronics, software, and industrial design. I think that's the short version. So I wanted to reflect a little bit about connecting things, because I think our team, and I think a lot of other teams, have been so busy to be able to connect things, because I think right now we're almost forgetting that it used to be quite hard. There was a lot of ideas we had which we were unable to develop for the market because of not being usable, not being able to set it up for normal consumers, but also because they were too expensive. And a lot of these things are now possible, and now is actually the time to think of, is this a valuable contribution to society or not? Kind of a link. This is our first project we did 2 months after we graduated in 2007. We met with Bas van Abel, who was then at Waag Society, and later spearheaded Fairphone, which is of course an amazing project. Back then, he gave us a chance to work on Scotty together with Tinker IT. Alexandra is somewhere, but mostly Massimo Banzi and Ubi De Veo we worked with. So there's this old aspect ratio video that kind of explains it. The task was to connect children who are hospitalized for longer durations of time with their families in an effective way, so not a verbal way, but in a tap on the shoulder, a wink of an eye. We made 2 Scotties in Paris that were able to communicate to each other by sending color codes. So you can say, like, orange means that I'm sad, but these color codes are something that a family agrees on. So it doesn't have, colors don't have a lot of universal meaning, but it's something more of a secret code that you have. And there is an intimacy, because if you press its waist, then there is a small vibration. If the other person holds it, then you have a kind of strengthened vibration, so you know that you're holding hands over distance. So we made 15 pairs in the end, which were tested in hospitals and later on also in elderly homes. But I wanted to actually show a little bit more about the process that took place. So, I mean, remember, we were 2 months graduated and we knew a little bit about injection molding, but 3D printing wasn't that easy. So we had all the electronics built together with Tinker and all these components selected, and then how to make a nice feeling casing. Well, what we did is we poured it all in polyurethane. So Scotty is incredibly massive. There's no way to open it. The only good news, I think, is that this 13-year-old Scotty is slowly disintegrating because it's polyurethane. So in 50 years' time, I will hopefully be able to stand here and show you Scotty's guts, so to speak, and then we can have a nice hackathon. But that's incredibly not open. Software-wise, it is very open, though. So 2 years ago, we met with a couple of people that worked on it, and then we kind of reflected, like, okay, how did we connect Scotty back then? Well, what we did is there was a separate Bluetooth Arduino board that was communicating to a Mac Mini, which was actually stored under the hospital beds, that was connected to the local area network, and then to a server. And well, some of the other components are also quite big, and that's when we reflected, like, technically, how would we do it? And I have to remember, it's around the same time that Nabostack, which I think from a consumer perspective is kind of the first effective IoT or connected products out there. Well, of course, we bought one and we opened it, and we found this huge Wi-Fi PCMIA card that used to be put in laptops to get them online, and we couldn't use that, so we had this whole other system. And of course, yeah, right now, I mean, we would grab a ESP32 or another Wi-Fi module, and it would be terribly easy. It's also kind of interesting to see that some components haven't shrunken that well, like batteries. I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit, but not that much. You would still need quite a battery. Things like a motor, a vibrator, yeah, it's harder to shrink down at the same rate. So most of these products we do nowadays are mostly battery and maybe some sensors and actuators. And yeah, the smarts of it can be quite tiny. After Ping or after Scotty, we kind of reflected on what stuck with people, and the notion of that someone thinks of you. By a physical object that felt quite strong, and we felt, oh, there's a lot of more people than, fortunately, there's a lot more people that are not hospitalized, so can't we come up with something simple that helps these? So this is Ping. Back in 2008, we made a few sets of these, which were put in a museum and tested with a few users, and it's very simple. You turn one on, I forgot to mention, you turn one on and both light up like really dimly, and only when the other one is on, then you have a proper reading light, wherever you are in the world. So we designed it, and then we made a business case around it. Okay, how are we going to bring this to market? Back then, not everyone even had Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi, even if you could fit a card like this inside this lamp, which we couldn't, then even then it wouldn't have really solved it. So we came up with a dongle which you put into your router and then has like a open 900 megahertz link. But of course it all adds to the costs, and then we came up with that the set was like 240 euros, and that was problematic. And actually not much happened with that. We got a few nice awards, which was nice, but it didn't come to market. And actually recently we've kind of been showing the idea to people and said, hey, this is still very relevant. And I think people understand it also more, because right now a lot more people have information overload, so they kind of want to stay away from mobile phones. Whereas back then, I think most of the responses, especially here in Holland, were like, hey, you can send an SMS, it's free. I mean, you can send just hi, and then it's over. Yeah, you can. And I think now that's kind of shifted. So now we're able to make a much cheaper version of it that connects over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And it's a very 0 to 1 communication. That's it, actually. So for these type of solutions, we're also I also want to reflect a little bit on what we think are valuable technologies, or technologies that we have to do something with, or that we get requests for in the future. Well, of course, there's a lot of low power wireless area networks that are coming to our path. Right now, for the consumer product space, I mean, it's very messy. Like every country has their own network, so we experiment with it, but we unless it's very local, we don't really see it into consumer products that are released worldwide. But we'd be glad to be proved wrong. So that's about connecting things, and how can you use things to connect people? Well, one example is actually this. This is a game board idea. What you're seeing actually now is built in a hackathon in 3 days, where we figured, okay, this iPad came out, and what is this iPad? Is this going to replace the phone, or it was really, really brand new? And we figured, well, maybe this is going to be more of a family device. And then we tried to play board games with it, and we felt that it's really prohibiting because, yeah, what ends up happening if you play Trivial Pursuit, and your players just grab the iPad and then do their thing and then pass it on, and it doesn't have any of the charm that playing a game of, I don't know, Monopoly or any other board game has. So we figured, well, why don't we connect it to a board? And we quickly prototyped it. Oh, that's loud. Let me see if I can. No, I cannot control it. Anyway, I want to move on to what we actually ended up doing. So we approached a board game company here in Rotterdam, Identity Games, and they really liked the idea, and we made a product that came out in the United States, where there's several games you can play on one platform. So there's, I think back then, 6 games. And if you walk with your playing pieces across the board, then the iPad recognizes it, and there's new content that you can update. So there were all educational games mostly, some fast whack-a-mole games. And it was a little bit like Tintin going to America, because they thought it was a nice opportunity to approach Apple and Amazon and Toys R Us and just put that product out there as fast as possible. That proved to be challenging without any marketing campaign. So I mean, it sold okay, but not good enough for the United States, because it's such a huge market. So then we kind of regrouped, and then we made a Dutch version. And they had a lot of Dutch famous person holding it, and then in Holland it sold very well. And we also learned from it by keeping these questions updatable and keeping them relevant, there is value there, because you can actually track, with Google Analytics, we track that people continue to play, which is not something that a product designer is often able to do, because you put a product out there and then you're not able to track what is being used. But we also felt that the iPad as a device is very intrusive, and we kind of were inspired by this project. So this is not our project, this is Cubetto. And what I really, really like about it is that it teaches you the fundamentals of, I would not say programming, but like coding to kids without using any screen. So you're able to control this robot with physical objects. And we have one at home, and it's quite fun, and it learns a certain way of thinking without having this screen in the middle. So that's why in the beginning of this year, together with NXP, we made a kind of a new version relying on NFC. So each playing piece has a little chip inside. Can I control the music? So we made a music sequencer where you're able to have these panels put onto an empty canvas to create your own musical interface, or use the same platform to play party games or puzzle games. And it's more an invitation. So there's actually a Raspberry Pi in it, so you can game developers can develop their own games with it. And so far we've made 10. So it's more of a what can we do with this technology? Whereas like Game Changer was really like, this is it, and this is out of the box. And this is more, we want to talk to people. And we were at South by Southwest last year, and there were so many people from the music industry that really jumped in it, the idea of having customizable, tangible user interfaces, and that kind of liked that idea of it. So let's see where that goes. And for us, it's also new to open it up. So this is another more open example. It's Ding. It's a set of modular bricks, which was we made to make electronics more tangible for those who are not at a, like I would say, Arduino level of hacking. I don't think there's a lot of people that it was catered for in this room, but there are still people that get a bit frightened when they see a PCB, and we figured, well, if we make these single function wooden bricks, mostly for adults or designers or marketeers to make systems themselves, then they can also be more involved in what it means to use these sensors and how you can use them. Responsibility in there, and of course, if you can do some simple scripting, you can also change the code. by tapping one of these logic bricks, but you can also just have a kind of a drag drop experience. So the other facet is, but we have been engaged, is to locate things. So how can we come up with localized, relevant content? So there were a lot. In 2009, we got contracted by the Graphic Design Museum. It unfortunately doesn't exist anymore in Breda. And they wanted to have indoor navigation, but they had like a full basement, so there was no GPS signal. So what we ended up doing is put Wi-Fi hotspots. We bought 10 euro Wi-Fi routers, which were not even connected. So it's not even internet connected, but all these, we use the signal of the Wi-Fi to pinpoint where a user is in the museum, and then be able to present the relevant extra content videos when you're there. And actually, they work quite well because these were 10 euro hotspots, and but unfortunately, Apple closed down the ability to read Wi-Fi information. So another project we did around localization is for Next Nature Network. So our project, this one should have audio actually. Oh, that, yes. So you're able, if you download this app and you put your headsets on and you walk around or you travel, then you can hear the Wi-Fi landscape. So you hear, when there's a very strong signal, then you hear one dominant singer. Or if there is a lot of Wi-Fi networks, let's say in Times Square, then you hear a lot of more of a kind of a char, I would say. And actually the voices also are different from open networks to secure networks. Yeah, the system responds to it, and it kind of makes you aware of Wi-Fi networks. It doesn't mean to scare people. I mean, there's also apps that are more about find a spot where there's no Wi-Fi because that feels better. But this is more questioning if we need all those networks, I guess, and what does it mean to be completely surrounded by them. We also did a lot of Bluetooth iBeacon projects for localization to come up with relevant content. And actually, we're now looking for next year into ultra-wideband as a promising technology for localized interactions. And it actually is a quite old technology in a way, but it was actually used as an alternative for Wi-Fi. Well, that didn't happen. But it's great for localization, so you can, and peer-to-peer. So it's not really internet connected, so it can be, but it doesn't have to be. So you have two nodes, and you have the simplest implementation is that you know the distance. So if that guy has a node and I walk to it, then we know our relative distance very accurately, unless with 2.4 gigahertz you kind of have an idea, but then it's like a 5 meter accuracy, maybe 2, and with this you have like a 10 centimeter accuracy. And then you can also do ranging in that you can see where someone is in a 120 degrees angle. So this video, NXP, which is our client made together with Volkswagen. I hope this one doesn't have sound. I'm sorry, it's very, very corporate, and so they're really looking into this technology for, well, surveillance and control of, in this case, cars, but also doors. You can do, pretty interesting and scary things because you can analyze movement patterns, and those movement patterns can mean something. In this case, they're demoing that you can have this guy has a certain movement pattern, and that therefore the car unlocks seamlessly. This guy has another movement pattern, and then it doesn't work. But we feel that there is a lot of potential in this technology, especially because it's not connected in a way. It's very local. But at the same time, we don't really know yet. Well, we're one or two projects we're working on, which we cannot share yet. Hopefully next year. But we feel that this technology has a lot of potential. The last part is about powering things. I think with Scotty I already touched on it. So most products are becoming more and more just battery and then a little bit of electronics. And in this day and age, it's also maybe kind of a waste. So we work together with QMod, Dana, who presented also 2 years ago at ThingsCon, to make QMod, which is actually an energy kit to learn kids about sustainable energy, so you can harvest energy using what's called a joule thief, from plants, from kinetic energy, so like a windmill, from solar power, and all these sources, and it's all stored on a capacitor. So it doesn't have a battery, but it has a supercapacitor, which doesn't store a lot of energy. It doesn't store it for a long period of time, but as long as you have a renewable source of energy, then you can do great things with it. And we kind of use that technology as well in a smart greenhouse, also an educational project where there are sensors that measure the climate, the light conditions, and the water conditions of a greenhouse for kids. But we didn't want to have a battery in there because, I mean, if you put it outside and you have to put a USB cord, so we put a supercapacitor in there and a small solar panel, and yeah, that works really great. I mean, it's not easy, but because you need to have your system go in different levels of sleep. Yeah, that's basically it. I saw you standing up.
Before we ask Marleen to join for a very short Q&A with the audience, you've been connecting things for many years, working with really big companies as well. Yeah. Are there projects where you, in retrospect, think that's one we shouldn't have done, or this is actually was interesting from the point of view of a designer, but it's terrible for the planet? Are there projects like that where you feel like, in hindsight, maybe I could have taken a different decision?
Yeah, fortunately not that many, but well, it's sometimes a bit more nuanced. So we're doing this project for a big client with a racetrack, and it started out with a pretty interesting idea of having one small racetrack that measures speed of your cars and identity of your cars. And then we built that, and it was kind of nice. And then this huge organization kind of goes with it. Oh, we should do much more. And then they came up with the idea of having smart tracks. So they put a little chip and then actually wirelessly connect a wired connection to all the tracks, so that you know which track you have built, and then you can, I don't know, link that to speed to the track you've built. But at some point, in this case, we didn't do the industrial design, but because there's electronics in there, I mean, all these track cases have to be withstand the fault test and not able to break, which sounds nice, but it also means that they weigh, I don't know, 20 times more than the really tiny tracks that you can keep on using for 50 years. Basically was too much effort
for what it
yeah, and then it became a huge box, and that is, I mean, then in that case, I mean, it's not always an excuse, but you are, as a design studio, we're one player, and sometimes, yeah, I guess we could have said, okay, this part of the project we'd rather not do. They didn't make that many, and it didn't become a success. The small thing became a success, the big thing didn't. So yeah. I guess.
No, but I can see why that is
more
not
eco.
An ideal project.
It's more the plastics that I'm really worried about, and the amount of fun it brought.
But there's no project that you would consider part of the surveillance network, where the company with all its power is actually collecting data they might as well not have, but they can now get them because of a game or a toy or whatever you make.
No, I mean we try to not use names, for instance, to not use identities, not to use. Sometimes there is an app, but there is not really a user account system, so it's a very local connection. Of course, there's things like app updates where you can have new questions, but yeah, so we try to be more and more aware of it. Let's put it like that. But in the past, I don't think we've stored a lot of data. Yeah. For a lot of these projects, it's also expensive. I mean, to store it all, and then you have to have. We always say to clients, yeah, if you want to store it all, what are the questions you want to have answered? And if there's no real good way of answering that question, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't do it. I mean, there's also good examples, like a coffee roaster that has several components that wear out over time a little bit. So by able to track that, you can have the firmware tweaked with how the device works and make sure that the device works for a longer period of time. Okay. So then you're tracking something very specific, a sensor inside a machine. Yeah.
Okay. Let's ask Marleen to come up here as well, because I think you're sort of at two sides. You're not on different sides, but two sides of the same problem. You work with really big companies. And they are largely, I think, unaware of the societal needs, planet needs, surveillance, worries. They're more aware of costs and...
But startups as well, actually. Last year, I think we gave a workshop for one client that wanted to make a baby monitor. And then they wanted to have that Wi-Fi connected. And that was one of the first projects we said, we're not going to do it.
Okay.
So, even though, I mean, some of the ideas behind it were pretty good, but you're recording in a children's bedroom. And that, by the way, is in a lot of cases also the parents' bedroom. So, you should not do that. So, of course, there's a lot of big evil companies, but there's also a startup naivete which can be as damaging. And some of these, like Ring, for instance, was a startup, not so long ago. It was bought by Amazon, so now it's big tech 4 years ago.
Now let's imagine we all here in this room, and you as well, want the same thing, like a world where we're not surveyed unnecessarily, or not at all, and where we don't ruin the planet. Marleen, you, at the end of your book, you really make a very clear call to not only regulation, but the commons and the citizens and all the people in the public domain to control the companies. Whereas you work with the companies that are now at play. How can we do a call to those companies? Is there not something in the middle where we can also... We have to make it a shared problem, because otherwise we're not going to solve it, probably, right?
Well, I think it's a lot about what is the business model of a company. And what you just described, I think it's very interesting that you said that there's a naivete in startup culture. Oh. When you have the wrong type of capital that wants to have an exponential growth and want to have an exit, you step by step you will be in a data surveillance model, because that's the only business model that can have exponential growth. So to me, a lot of the startup culture is very, I really dislike, because very talented people are being put into a position that they are going to work for this type of capital. And so I believe but I do believe in entrepreneurship, and I do believe in companies, because we need market. I mean, I'm not against the market. But we have to come up with new configurations between what is a sound business model. An exponential growth, shareholders value business model in the Silicon Valley type of companies are really not the type of companies that we need. So I think by defining values first, and that's why I put them first in the stack, and then think what kind of governance, what kind of funding mechanisms, what kind of market it is. When we do this really properly, we open up a lot of opportunities for companies, actually. Because at the moment, this is not a competitive world anymore. The platforms are so big. So there's also this stuff that they just buy you up. I think this, and then this is Wunderlist, bought by...
Snips, terrible.
Snips, bought up by one of the... And then people are happy because, well, they made their big buck. And then in 2 years' time, sometimes earlier, it's being killed. And then or had sucked out the creative stuff, the new stuff, the disruptive nice part of it is being sucked into Google or Amazon or whatever. So I think we need really new alliances between the smart people that are in this industry and build European business models for technology.
Okay.
And maybe startups should be funded differently as well. I mean,
but do you also think there could not be? I mean, I guess the trust mark and also what you with public spaces are working on is also to make the big companies not the big ones. I think we are lost. You know, Facebook, Google, Amazon. We can't do anything anymore. But the rest, wanting to be on the good side of things, wanting to be closer.
Yeah, but then for example, if you think, what I really believe in is cities that are now become more responsible. So there's this coalition of cities for responsible data, and they are now defining their procurement on the basis of these values. So if cities and governance and public institutions make it part of their procurement that you should not have a data surveillance business model, and then the ones that don't have it but have, then something will happen.
Yeah.
So then you give a bonus to the companies that are using public values and have public values inside, as we did also with the footprint, ecological footprint. So ecological footprint and not surveil and having public values in the digital sphere is almost the same kind of idea.
So it must make you unhappy that so many schools are going for the Google route and everything.
Well, I think if you have public funding, you should not put people in danger. So schools should not be able to do this.
Yeah.
They should. So no drugs, no alcohol, no cloud. Before you're 18, and after that, it's your own fault.